All right, let's go ahead and get started for the evening. We want to welcome everyone back to La Space Academy Level 2, Session 9. As I just mentioned, we've got a great speaker tonight that's going to help provide you guys an opportunity to really prepare another way for workforce. You know, we've been talking a lot about technical skills, and all the speakers we've had have helped you develop this knowledge and skills about working at NASA and that have helped with your proposals. But what about resumes and interviews when you actually are trying to get these jobs? We've got a great speaker tonight, Dr. Brian Dansbury, that's going to help us all understand how to polish up our resumes and how to ace an interview. So we've got a great session for you tonight. Let me go ahead and stop share of this screen and bring Sherry up. Sherry, how are you doing today?
Well, as long as I can actually get all my things in order after coming back from a very intensive week at Lunar Planetary Institute or Lunar Planetary Science Conference in Houston, which is pretty much nonstop nerd with all kinds of great, great technical sessions, all the updates and all the missions. It is great, and we had five La Spacers there as well that we got to meet up with, and it was really fun to sit down face to face with some of y'all. And anyway, we're talking about the La Space meetup map. I see that idea has gotten born about where people are going to be, and we absolutely want to invite everybody to come by. And as you're in town in Tempe, I think we have at least one coming in Wednesday. I think
Tomorrow,
Dan,
yeah.
yeah. To make sure you just give us a holler, and we'd love to meet you. So anywhere we're going to be, we'll let you know. And if there's a possibility of us being able to touch base, we'd love to do that. So
Definitely. And if y'all want to see the photos from Sherry's meetup with some of our students, you can do that on our Instagram account. So
there you
she
go.
got to meet up with Cody from your team here, from this particular cohort, and a couple others. So looking forward to sharing those with you.
That was a lot of fun. And we did a poster on La Space as well. And we had NASA headquarters people by. And again, what you all are doing is really turning heads in terms of the experience you're getting, and just some of the concepts and things we've been showing um, your level one types of PDRs, and talking about the experience, and now what's going on with level two as well. Um, and then the new level ones coming in. So we have a lot to talk about. We're we're doing amazing kinds of findings in terms of how the workforce development is going, and things that we're changing on the fly depending on how things are going for you. So this has been really helpful in terms of NASA seeing a different way for the new generation to be trained. And with that, I want to just digress a little bit to introduce our speaker. And you got Brian Dansbury. We are very much a good twosome in terms of causing trouble at NASA. That's generally the kinds of things we've done in the past, and good things. That's how I want to qualify that. Good things in terms of we used to run the largest internship program for undergrads at NASA, he and I, when I was at Johnson Space Center. And we really collaborated to do some new, really kind of curve busting kinds of things. And when it
We're
comes to
bonding over
somebody,
being troublemakers.
troublemakers, yeah, well, I'm trying to avoid the T word, Brian. It has just kind of some kind of not NASA like um, connotations, but no, we were troublemakers. Disruptors is the word I like to use. Disruptors in a good way, in terms of undergrad experiences. And so we ran the internships across all 10 centers and 2 research centers for NASA. And we placed about 330 students a year, I think, across all the teams across NASA. So we had quite a big footprint. And we've taken a lot of that experience of what Brian and I and our teams put together. And that is your heritage. That's what we have taken, and you are the recipients of a lot of that experience that we have in this creation of La Space. So Brian's going to come to you again in a very important way, and I think his presentation is going to give you a lot of pointers in terms of the kinds of things you'll want to highlight on your resumes, interview tips, those kinds of things as you're getting ready for those, next steps. We want to give you some good input. And Brian currently is a program scientist on the International Space Station, but your background is also engineering.
Yeah.
You were at Langley, working
Mhm.
in the test engineering and the wind tunnels and whatnot. So he comes from a engineering background at a NASA center, but he also has an education experience through the University of Cincinnati, where he did a lot of mentoring of interns and people that are getting ready to do what you are getting ready to do with in terms of the resumes and whatnot. And I know we've been talking to a lot of people and doing some mentoring on our own for the this academy and the Space One Academy, now that it's internship season, and some of you are getting ready to graduate. So we thought this would be timely and giving you a chance to kind of think about what your resume looks like and new ideas that maybe you want to incorporate. So with that, Brian, why don't we
Awesome.
launch?
While Brian actually gets set up, we do have a Menti poll. We're curious to see how confident exactly you guys are about your current resume. So thinking about your current resume, are you very confident about it, somewhat neutral, and you haven't thought about it at all? Or are you unconfident about it? Or do you just not have a resume at all?
And I want to say, also in terms of, are you confident or unconfident, as some of these are starting to come in, about it's going to achieve your objective? How well is it telling your story in terms of your career pathways and your previous experience? That's kind of what we're trying to gauge here.
And Sherry, I don't know where you would be. I would be somewhat unconfident because I haven't updated my resume in about 2 years, so it doesn't tell the full story.
Oh dear. Well, I just had to update mine, so
There you
I'm
go.
actually in the better category. Although I'll see after tonight what you say if I actually will still not want to go back and redo some of my sections. Who knows?
Don't let Sherry fool you. You have an amazing expert on internships and interviewing and resumes and lots of other things at your disposal. And I learned a
And
lot from Sherry.
and I will pay you for that later, Brian. Thanks.
Absolutely, I appreciate it.
So we see
Okay.
about half of the group in here has
Yeah.
contributed. So 18 feels somewhat confident, 9 very confident
Yeah,
ones.
there we go.
4 of you
That's
don't have a
27.
resume, and hey, that's
That's
fine
over
because
half.
tonight you're going to be learning how to actually structure one in a
And we've got
professional
some
way.
examples of resumes we'll get to pull up later too, which I'm kind of excited about because that sort of wraps up everything all together.
Yeah,
And so I'm not going to be getting just the wisdom of one person. I pulled these presentations from colleagues around the country, and the resume section of this presentation I think came originally from Professor Anita Todd, and she was running the co-op program at Penn State for a while and was a colleague of mine at the University of Cincinnati. And then later, when we get to talking about interviews, there's some material that's pulled from Georgia Tech. And I actually try to leave that material alone because when you're working on resumes and doing this interviewing, it's not rocket science. It's a little bit more of an art. So there are different opinions, different ways you can do things. And I think it's good to have information coming from a lot of different directions. And anybody that tells you they know the way to do a resume or an interview or something, that there is no the way. You've got to use your personality, and you've just basically got to present yourself in the best way you can. Just be the best version of yourself.
And Brian, wouldn't you also say that they need to customize it for each submission if they can, in
If you
terms
can.
of?
Any communication tool that you're putting together, you know your audience and you know the objective, and the objective is what do you want that audience to do, which will bring you in for an interview when we're talking about a resume. So yeah, when you get that opportunity to customize it, you definitely want to do that. And that's why everyone's resume is going to look different, because it's a reflection of your individual experience, your strengths, your what you bring to the table. So no two resumes are going to be exactly alike.
Right. All right. Are we ready to go?
We are ready to go, and I actually have your presentation, Brian, loaded up.
Hey,
And
Dan, you
ready.
actually look color-coded with your office today.
Do I? Here, blue is one of those colors.
With the satellite view in the background. Nice.
Speaking of interviews, I've always heard that blue is a trusting color, right? You wear blue and people seem to trust you more. So
there you go.
I dressed for the occasion.
All right, so we're going to talk about resumes. We're going to talk about interviews, which is of course one of the scariest things. And then a little bit at the end, just to wrap up, is some feedback that I got from a manager that hired our co-ops when I was at the University of Cincinnati, just talking about workplace survival. And I think that's a good way to sort of tie all the things together. And in this slide, I'm not trying to brag, but I just want to let you know it's always important to know where the presenter is coming from. I've been in your shoes. I was the aerospace engineering undergraduate student at the University of Cincinnati. I was lucky enough to go to a school that had a mandatory co-op program. And co-op, for those of you that don't know what that is think of an organized internship system where you're going to go off and you're going to go into the workplace for a semester, then you're going to come back to school, and you alternate for the middle 3 years of a 5-year program. So I actually got hired in at Langley Research Center at NASA. I was able to do 6 rotations at Langley before I ever graduated. So you can imagine that made my resume look pretty good with that level of experience on it. And it really got me the full-time position at NASA then after that, and got my career started. So I've done that. While I was at NASA, I was then able to be the supervisor for interns, the mentor for co-op students. Eventually ended up back at my alma mater, Cincinnati, running the biomedical and aerospace engineering co-op programs. Probably placed students in about 12 to 1,500 semesters of internship experience. And then came back to NASA, where Sherry and I hooked up to run an internship program in the 300 to 400 student range for several years. And then I got to have even more fun and sort of be the manager, a little more hands-off of all of the NASA internships, with the exception of co-op, and that ended up being about 1,500 to 2,000 students a year. And that was an interesting experience. So I'm just here to give you that perspective from both the student, from being the supervisor, working with the students, and from running programs both in academia and in the workplace. All right, moving on. So we'll start with resumes, and then we'll talk about interviews, and we'll get that employer perspective and hopefully have time for Q&A. Go on. So I told you the first set of slides came from a colleague of mine, Anita Todd, and she loved this one in particular because we were always working with freshmen getting ready to go into the co-op program, and you really needed to get their head around the concept that workplace was a serious place, and you needed to sort of set aside what you've been doing in high school and get serious about it. Go on to the next slide. So Jerry led me into this already, probably not having even looked at this slide. But you always need to want to know what is the purpose of the communication, whatever it is you're doing. And the end purpose is you want to provoke an action. You want to get an interview with this resume. To do that, you've got to attract some initial attention, and then you've got to maintain that interest. I call it the 15-second test. There can be a tired mid-level manager at the end of the day that has a stack of 20, 30, 50, God help them, 100 or more resumes. And they've got to look through that and determine how many of these am I going to spend a lot of time looking at in great detail. So there's the 5 things you want to do overall to pass that 15-second test. But the bottom line is you just want it to be clean and crisp and be kind to the reader so they can find the information they need right away and say, okay, this is something I want to take a closer look at. Go on to the next slide. So at a high level, there's sort of these 5 C's you need to pay attention to. You want it to be clean. You want the appearance to be attractive. This is the first indication of you that your potential employer sees. You want to be concise. This is not a time to show that you are Hemingway and you can write the most convoluted and beautiful sentence in the history of the world. You want to be concise. You want to use short, forceful sentences. They don't have to be complete English, AP English sentences. They've got to just convey clear pictures that everyone can understand what it is you did, what it is you're trying to convey. You got to be correct. No mistakes of any kind. And I guarantee you that once you've rewritten your resume 3 or 4 times, you will not notice all the mistakes in it because you know what the word is supposed to be. You don't notice the typos. Make sure you've got some other people looking at it, friends that you trust, take advantage of the opportunities that you have at your university. Take advantage of all the resources that you have there. I know I didn't do that as well as I should have as an undergraduate. So I'm trying to tell you, don't do what I did. Take full advantage of those opportunities. There's a lot of people there that can look over your resume, can give you some hints, can give you tips. They might say it in a different way than I would or Sherry would. And it's important for you to get as much input as you can on that. But everything you put on there, be concrete, be specific. Remember, we're talking specifically about STEM people looking at your resume now. If you're in engineering or you're in science, we like numbers, we like specifics, we like concrete facts. So realize that about your audience and make sure what you're putting down there isn't flowery. It's stating the facts and that you're putting yourself in the best possible light. This is the time for you to take credit for everything that has happened and for not being kind and giving credit to the rest of the team and all that stuff. This is your sales document. So don't exaggerate, don't make stuff up, but take credit for everything you can take credit for. Next slide. Okay, so now we'll go through some details here. And again, there's a lot of slides here. I might skip over some of the points here and there. I basically left it in so that it can be a resource for you all later on. But typically the order of the items is important so that there's a flow. And again, you're being kind to that tired supervisor at the end of the day that has a stack of resumes to look at. The last thing you want to do is irritate him or her and them have to hunt around to find the information they're looking for on your resume. So be consistent in the ordering of doing things. Make sure that your contact information and your name is right up there at the top in bold, and you go right through your education and your experience. Talk about any specific skills, certifications, qualifications you have that wouldn't be obvious just based on your degree or on the experience that you're putting on there. And then there's some optional categories you can put in that might showcase your achievements or some of your, give you a chance to talk a little bit about things you're interested in. Next slide. So some of those optional categories, one of them that is not a personal favorite of mine. I'm not big on having job objectives at the top of the resume, particularly if you're creating a resume for internships and you're not targeting a specific employer. This is a general resume you're going to give many employers. And the reason I'm not that big on job objectives is it's not going to provide any new information. I mean, as an intern, what are you going to say? I'm really looking to learn more about mechanical engineering. Well, we know that you're applying for an internship at a company that has mechanical engineers. So there may be some occasions where you put some specific information in there that's new. And in fact, I think with the example resumes we're going to have an end, there's a couple of them that did a very good job with that. So we'll talk about that. But in general, don't feel like you have to have a job objective unless it's going to add some sort of value or some fact that you want your audience to see right at the beginning, right at the top. Achievements, scholarships, and awards, those can be separate categories if you have enough of those. It's very important to highlight those things. Activities are really important to put on there because it's the opportunity to show the soft skills that employers are looking for that aren't always obvious just by your GPA or by the classes that you're taking. The employers want to know that you can work in a group, that you have some leadership skills, that you have interpersonal skills that will allow you to be a productive member on a team. And if you have the opportunity to put interest in there, sometimes that's good. Personal background, typically you're not gonna do that too much, but if there's something special about your story, put on. One thing that I think students forget and don't realize how valuable it is to employer, if for whatever reason in your background or in your education, you're fluent in a second language, that's a really important skill in the workplace. So be sure you think about those kinds of things. Non-traditional students that I talk with that maybe come from a community college background, they're concerned that they're not going to stand up to the MITs and Stanford students of the world. That's not true. You have a different set of background and strengths that if you highlight it right, you're going to stand out just fine with your resume. These are the places you can do that. Let's go on to the next slide. All right, so starting with the heading, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that. Obviously, you need to have your name in there, and it needs to be obvious who you are. In this day and age, I think the cell phone is the most important thing to put on there because that's the number that you are most likely going to be able to answer. Email address, other ways to communicate you're good. I get a story about email addresses. I was teaching a class of about 110 students. They were freshmen getting ready to apply for internships for the first time. And I put a resume up there. It was a good student. The resume was strong. And I asked everybody in the class, how many of you all would interview this student? And I only gave them the 15 seconds to take a look at it. And almost everybody raised their hand in the class. And then I said, well, did you notice that, when you're about to email this person to ask them for an interview, that their email address is deathbringer429 at, I don't know if it was email or Yahoo or whatever, it doesn't matter. What matters is that the email address that he had chosen to put on his resume for professional employment was Deathbringer. I asked again, how many of y'all would like to go ahead and hit that email and bring Deathbringer in for an interview? Nobody raised their hands. Well,
I have one better, Brian. I had one that was Pimp Mobile.
Pimp Mobile, that's nice. That's nice. Yeah,
I had a little chat with them about changing their email too.
Yeah. So all of you, take a second. You might put the best resume together in the world, but take a second to think about, what does your email address say about you? Make sure it's not one you made up when you were in 8th grade or in high school, or your fraternity or sorority buddies talked you into it. Make sure it's a nice professional email address. Use your school email address, something that's nice and simple. The other thing you might want to keep in mind too is, what kind of voicemail message do you have on your phone when people call and leave a message? Because as soon as you put your resume out there, you need to be prepared for companies to call you. And I remember I had a student that wasn't getting a lot of interview opportunities, and I put a phone call in to talk to him, and he had a great message. It started out by saying, hello, and it paused just long enough for me to start talking. And then he got me, he got me. He started laughing. He's like, oh, sorry, I'm not really here to leave a message. And that was funny, but I kind of asked him, really, is that what you want to do to your employer before you've even had a chance to have an interview? So think about what kind of message you have, and just be professional, and think about it from the point of view of the audience that you're now sending these resumes out. All right, next slide. And I'm not going to go through these examples. I think these are a little fancy in terms of how you could do your headers, and I think the 3 resumes we'll have at the end do it a little better. Let's go on to the next slide. All right, the objective. So I've already told you I'm not a big fan of objectives, but if you're going to have it, it's got to be providing some new information. And if you're going to do it, make sure you're brief, direct, and specific. And where it becomes valuable is if it's targeted for a specific job. So you've kind of now committed that you're going to create and target your objective for every employer if you can. You want to stay away from flowery objectives that don't really provide information, and just say you're a wonderful, wonderful communicator, and you're lovely at this, and you're great at that. Because the engineer, an engineer like myself that's looking through resumes is like, really, you're wonderful. Tell me what wonderful is. We like numbers. We like things that are defined. So I'm not saying you can't be a little flowery and show your personality, but don't go to any great length. I think, again, there's a couple of great examples on those resumes we'll show at the end where we'll talk about this. Go to the next slide. So here's a couple of examples, and you can see, as long as you're sticking with facts are in good shape, and obviously if you're tailoring it, then you can add with an interest in the automotive industry in the Pittsburgh area. I would hope that student was applying to a job in the automotive industry in the Pittsburgh area. But again, it's not really new information. And here's where it gets flowery, applying my chemistry skills to a position with a progressive company that's wonderful and does this and that. People, it's not going to hurt you, but you're taking up space with words that doesn't really help. Let's go on to the next slide. So education. And for education experience, you want that reverse chronological order. You want to put the most recent stuff first. So put your degree out there, typically bold it, make sure everybody knows what your major is. That's one of the first things I'm looking at if I'm looking through a stack of resumes. It's okay to use acronyms for the bachelor degree, but you want to spell out what the degree is. And by the way, acronyms is something you need to be careful of in general. Every acronym you put in, and you're going to be very tempted to do that because it saves space and gives you a chance to put more information on the resume. But be thinking about that audience. If everyone doesn't know what you mean by that acronym, then you might want to leave it off, or you may have to spell it out, is what I'm trying to say. You want to put the expected graduation date. If you have minors, dual degrees, make that clear that that's very impressive if you're going for a dual degree. Go ahead and put the other universities where you took classes. Even if you didn't necessarily get a degree there, if you took a semester of school there, go ahead and put that on there. I've had questions a lot about whether, once you get an associate degree and you're moving on and you're getting the bachelor, do you put that associate degree in there? I certainly put that other university. You were there a long time, you took classes there. Next slide. So things that you can or should put in there, GPA. If I'm looking in a stack of resumes and somebody doesn't put their GPA on there, I have to admit I'm thinking the worst. So you want to put your GPA on there. You obviously want to have it on there if it's a good GPA, if it's 3.0, something positive. But I think that even in the mid to upper twos, you want to put your GPA on there because you don't want someone like me looking at your resume and thinking the worst. Go ahead and put your GPA on there. Awards and activities. If you have enough of them, make that a separate area. And I think there's some good examples we'll show later of that as well. If you want to highlight some relevant courses, particularly if you think they will really pertain to the particular job that you're applying for, definitely highlight those relevant courses. Special training, seminars, things out of your life like that second language you may know or other things. Make sure that you have those highlighted, either here in the education section or in one of those optional sections further along. In high school information, by the time you're an upperclassman, maybe you don't have that in there anymore. If you're an underclassman and you're going for, say, your first internship as a sophomore, you might still have a little bit of information on there, but you work that off the resume as you get you get more experience. You get to put cool things like this particular class that you're involved in, other design opportunities, other work experiences. Next slide. So here, I like these examples fairly well. You've got the major highlighted, and again, you're helping me when I'm looking through a stack of resumes to be able to quickly, with those things in bold, look at the key pieces of information that I would want to look at. I'm looking at your major and saying, yeah, that major makes sense for the position that I have. GPA tells me that you're a good student, that you have the smarts to come in the door and be able to do the job. So relevant courses are listed there. You got the bachelor's here that you're going for, expected in May. You've listed your associate's degree on here. These are good examples. And I saw Dan type that in. Yeah, things like LaSpace. Spell that out. Let them know what that stands for. Don't hold on to the acronyms. Always consciously think through an acronym, because you will discover, particularly as you get farther and farther along, that you start thinking in acronyms and you're not even realizing you're doing it. So always make sure you take a minute to think about whether the mass audience you're putting this out to understands what that acronym means. Okay. I've always recommended, basically listing experience just in reverse chronological order. There are some cases where maybe putting just the relevant information first is important. Typically, if you're going for an internship and you're a student, reverse chronological order will work because you don't have enough different experiences and work experiences to be able to pull out just the relevant stuff. But we're going to talk about this a little bit when we look at the example resumes later, because there's a couple of good ones in there. Yeah.
Lee Roger was asking, do you really need relevant courses listed? I mean, is it something that
No.
is helpful, or is it just if you have room, maybe? But is it something you think a lot of reviewers are looking at, or will that be on the crawl? The crawler in terms of the website, if they're really trying to look through resumes and do it through AI to begin with? Are they looking for keywords?
Yeah, and when you're taking your resume information, you're cutting it up and you're putting into those online systems, then they begin looking for keywords. And
Yeah.
Sherry's setting me up. She knows very well the answer to that is yes. But that's what you want to do here. And if you're a mechanical engineer and you're taking mechanical engineering classes, I pretty much know what that is as an employer. So where you are maybe pulling out classes is if there's something that you've taken that you might consider out of the norm. And for those optional things, for those activities, or for things like pulling out a couple of highlighted classes, you're doing that to set yourself a little bit above the ordinary. So you want to do that in a situation where a class isn't something everybody has the opportunity to take, or you don't think every, physicist or mechanical engineer or civil engineer would take. Okay.
In terms, I have a couple more questions, if that's all right.
Go for it.
I'm just pulling from the website or the chat. So in terms of having a bad semester where, things happen, life happens, you have a below, like a 2.0 for a month or a particular semester, how, showing CUME is one thing. If they're looking at your transcripts, I mean, will that be just an automatic next kind of thing? They're just moving on, or is it something that, especially if you get an interview, you want to be able to have them understand on what maybe a root cause was, that death in the family, or there's lots of things that can cause people to go off, health issues,
Yeah.
whatever, but you don't have to volunteer any
information.
Sherry, Go ahead, Brian.
You don't have to volunteer any tier. And Sherry, you know this too. Sometimes when you're looking and if it required the transcript and the transcript's there, I've done this, and I know you probably have too, Sherry. If you're taking a look and there's somebody in the lower end of the GPA range that you're looking at, you take a look to see, was there one bad semester in there, and could there be a story behind that, and that's different than just seeing a consistent, B's and C's level, across the board. If that makes sense.
No, and it's true, and it's the kind of thing that I don't take those things seriously. If I know that somebody who was a really great student or was doing well suddenly took a nosedive, there's usually a reason. And if the recovery is what matters in showing that, you have that capability or being able to explain. And I wouldn't go into personal information such as health information, because you don't want to give them any other reason not to hire you, and that's not required. But if it's something that you feel comfortable sharing and you don't think it'll have any bearing on your future work capability, then you might choose to share or not. But just be selective on how you're doing that. But just know that that's not a forever thing, and it's not something that will cause people, just like Brian and I have done. It will just make us look at the rest of the big picture to see if that really firms up or not.
Mm-hmm. And while you were talking, I was able to see a couple of the messages going by here, and I probably would have gotten to it eventually, but I didn't. I was remiss in saying, typically for a resume, particularly if you're a student, you're looking at one page. Absolutely no reason in the world it should ever be more than 2 pages.
Yeah.
And 1 page is what you're looking for, and I would always have students come to me and say, there's no way my resume can fit in a page. And I would imagine that happened a dozen times every year, and I cannot recall a time that I was unsuccessful in getting it down to a page. If you space right and you organize properly, you can get it in a page. And hey, God bless you if you've got so much experience out there that maybe you need a page and a half. That's not the end of the world, but that's as far as you're going to go.
And let me just tell you another thing that's always an indicator to me. There are people that are name collectors or title collectors, and it comes in a resume, or it comes in an email, and the signature at the bottom has the 15 things that now you're doing, or you have titles of, or that you are, everything. And it makes me think, you don't look like you could do any of those well with all those things going on. And it actually raises questions and makes me less enamored than somebody who says, look at all the amazing things that I am. So be selective in terms of even just your signature, if you have an automatic signature, or the way that you sign any kind of an email or a cover letter. And I tend to find the people that, in my experience only, but the people that have the longest list of all the amazing things they are probably the least effective people that I've met, and have done the worst in some of the things that I've run. And so just, be selective, be transparent about what your intentions are, or what it is you're doing and things you do well, not just that you've actually have that won that title or whatever and now you don't do anything with it. So
Yeah. And I just saw it popped up. The student was asking, what if you were in the workplace for a while, you were active in the work field, and then you've gone back to school? You might have a little harder time squeezing down to a page, and you might. But what I'm saying is always be kind to that overworked reader so that you will get your resume looked at in detail, as opposed to just somebody picks it up and goes, oh my God, and sets it over here in the other pile. Maybe I'll get to it if these 5 or 6 that seem kinder to me don't work out. And one of the ways you can be kind is to help them filter what information they care about and what they might not care about. And when somebody asked me the last time we did this last week, when do you go from a resume format to a CV kind of thing where you just list everything in the world in a giant growing list of all your experiences? And a CV is not kind to the reader. So, when you're looking to particularly to break into a field, to get an internship, you need to be very kind to the reader first. And part of that kindness is, I can tell you in one page what it is you need to know about me. And by the way, you're not trying to give them the 100% complete picture of you. You're trying to interest them enough that they bring you in for an interview or they do a phone interview with you. That's 2 different goals there. And I think sometimes you lose track of what the goal is. The goal is to get an interview. In the interview, they can fill in the gaps and you can talk to them about anything you think is important about you to talk about. You've got to get to the interview first. All right. Definitely things you don't want to do, by the way, in doing this is, the resume is a positive thing. You don't talk about things that aren't positive. You don't talk in writing about reasons why you left a particular job or why you were let go or any problems or issues. You're always going to start with the positive. It's not the place to talk. You don't start your salary negotiations before you get the interview. So you're not talking about salary, or you're not putting a salary you had in the past. That student that was writing that maybe was in one work field career and is now changing track. Well, it might be a little while before you get back to the salary you had then. So if you put the salary you had in a job that maybe you were 3 or 4 years into, that might chase away those people who are going to bring you in for an internship or for an entry level beginning in this new field. All right, let's go to the next slide. So hints when we're talking about what you put in there. All experience is relevant experience. The experience section of your resume is where the employer is trying to figure out if you've got those interpersonal skills, if you can work in the environment that is their office environment or their factory floor environment, or if you're an archaeologist, their dig over somewhere in the Middle East, whatever it is. So even if it's just working in high school, between high school and college, if it was camp counselor, if it was, a summer research thing, all experience is relevant. And you want to paint a clear picture when you're defining that experience so that I know exactly what it is you're talking about. So you want to use action type verbs. You want to use specific numbers whenever you can. Not all McDonald's are the same. One McDonald's, you might be working a shift that hardly ever has very many people come in, and it's, $1,000 across the shift. Another place can be, in the middle of a very populated area, and you can be run ragged doing $10,000 or $20,000 worth of business at a time. If you can define the numbers of what it, clearly state what it is you did, and then define with some numbers and give me a feel for how hectic that was, what was involved with it, how much did you have, how hard did you have to work to accomplish that? And if you happen to improve a situation, if you can talk about how you bettered that position, or you moved up and gained more responsibility as you went along, you definitely want to highlight those things. A big mistake that people make that haven't really gone and gotten advice about resumes is we always, when we're thinking about what we did on our last job, it almost goes without fail. We start by listing the most mundane, basic things, the things we probably did first. And at the end of that list is the most complex, important stuff for an employer to understand, things that we did. Make sure you're listing things in order of, if the guy looking at this is only looking at it and reading the first half of this sentence, I want that person to get the biggest, I want to get the most out of that sentence I can. So put the most important stuff first, the stuff you really want them to remember. All right, let's go on. So here's a couple of good examples, and I think we're going to have some more when we show the resumes, so I'm not going to talk to these too much, but I like the bottom example here. We accurately manage more than $10,000 in cash and receipts each day. So you define that for me, and if I'm an engineer or I'm a scientist, I like numbers. So I already like you. You were kind to me. You presented some numbers and made a clear picture for me to understand what it is you did. So any chance you get to do that, be as specific as you can, and give me as much fact. Because if I'm having to try and imagine exactly what it is you're trying to tell me, and I have to work to think about what it could be, that it's not consciously going to turn me against you, but now I'm having to work to understand what it is you're trying to transmit from your resume. And that can't be good in terms of being able to get that interview you're going for. Next slide. So when you get into the skills and achievements and activities, things to highlight, computer skills. Sherry and I were talking about this recently. It is still, particularly in those online things where you're dropping everything in and they're looking for the keywords, computer skills. Most kind of everybody is looking to make sure. And don't forget to put the basics down. Don't forget that you know how to use Word, that you know how to use Excel. If you only list the complicated computer skills in your mind and you forget the basic ones, we as employers are not going to assume anything. So we're not going to assume that you understand how to use Word unless you tell us that you know how to use Word.
And Brian?
Yeah.
Can I want to just add a little bit to this, because as
Please.
We've been preparing the spreadsheets for the different offers of the Lucy internships, because we know their search a lot of times begins with computer skills, we actually designed the spreadsheet not only with your regular information, but then the first column that they come up to in terms of what you are about shows the computer skills. And because we know that that's their main shopping technique in terms of what they're looking for first. And so, we've talked about this over and over again. Look at your industry standard kinds of computer skills that you can acquire and make time to have that done, and look and see what other things are emerging that would be helpful. Lockheed Martin did this. I know Kinetics is doing this. These are the kinds of things that a lot of these employers are looking for. I will say, in looking at that column, people were putting in descriptives about their personality, not about their computer skills. You do not want to do that. I'm telling you right now, that was not productive. Immediately, they would discount you if that's the thing they were shopping by. So be serious. And Brian says it can be, Microsoft Office suite. It could be, specifics. And then, it could be the very technical things. They really are looking for a variety of assets they can bring in and be immediately useful.
Mm-hmm.
So don't monkey around with this particular column in terms of, or your on your resume. You need to make sure that you're using good professional language when you're describing whatever your skill sets are. And yes, and Jorge, I'm looking at your question. Yes, you should include Microsoft Project or Microsoft Word, PowerPoint, Excel. Excel is, if you know Excel and know it really well, not just the usual stuff, that is a huge asset for a lot of people in terms of their what they're looking for. So, highly proficient in Excel might be a really good way to distinguish yourself, and where you can do a lot of the cell loading and manipulation. That is a big deal, more than you think.
And if you can do more than the basic Excel, you can do the macros and you can do the manipulation. Right. If you can define that a little bit, if you only have enough space to put very highly skilled in it, that's great. But if you can define what it is that could help you
When
to nail that job.
when you show evidence of something that you've done along with what it is, built a program that did X, um, built a full spreadsheet that, for a large budget or whatever you want to do, show something that you actually had an output in that skill. Again, that's going to separate you from a lot of the other people.
Sherry, did you see what Dan did there? If you
No.
know Excel, you will excel.
Oh, Dan, you're so clever.
Thank you.
Yeah. Leadership positions, don't be shy about doing that. I had a lot of students, back in the day when I was at Cincinnati. A couple of them asked me if they should put their Eagle Scout on there. Well, yes, you should put your Eagle Scout on there. That shows leadership. It shows you go the extra mile and do things. So leadership positions, even something that you did back in high school like that, can really give that hint that the employer needs to go ahead and put you in the short stack and get you an interview. Academic achievement is going to be covered, and you certainly want to have scholarships and awards in there. We've talked about second languages. Public speaking is huge. If there are ways that you can indicate that you've not just done public speaking, but you've done it enough to feel semi-comfortable about it, that gives you a huge leg up. Because Sherry, I don't know about you, but I know periodically, I see these things out there in the news that the number one fear in America is not death, is not, taxes. It is having to speak in public. So, you really can separate yourself from the pack if you can demonstrate that you've got a background where you've had to do professional type speaking.
Well, and not only that, Brian, and we just got through a critical design review here at our Lucy mission, in fact, and the project people who are just basically the engineers that are making the instrument, that are, doing all the whole teamwork, all had to get up in front of a professional board of reviewers and present their work. And I mean, any kind of speaking like that doesn't have to be in front of a public necessarily, speaking and giving, a talk, but being able to present your work in a concise, very professional way, knowing your audience. In this case, it was professional reviewers that were engineers that were scrutinizing whether they were doing things the right way. That's an important asset in terms of an employer. Being able to tell the public about the cool company or the things you've done is also a real asset. But, that public speaking could be even in the context of your workplace. So the more you do it, the better you get and the less totally terrified you become. So just being able to do it and recognizing it as something that you can acquire is worth trying out. Okay. So
Yeah.
just make that a goal.
So I see some comments in the chat and questions about, in terms of public speaking, if they have non-educational background like youth pastor or religious type things, is that relevant for them to include as well if they really kind of became proficient at public speaking?
And to me, that's a way to show public speaking, and I would not have an issue with this. And Sherry, I want you to chime in too. You have to be careful when you're starting to politics and religion need to stay out of your resume as much as possible. Mm-hmm. But I mean, being a speaking and doing youth church stuff, just be very positive in how you do that, and tread lightly. But yeah,
and I think also that it just the aspect in which you are presenting yourself, that you're a balanced person, that you are a caring person, that you have hobbies. I mean, those kinds of things that show you that you're more well-rounded and not some person that's all locked up in a corner and doesn't even like to be out with people. That's a real positive. It just shows people that you're balanced and you'd be probably a really good team member. So, and Alyssa, I'm looking at you and I'm seeing your comment about Lucy Ambassador, and you really, when you get passionate about something and you're excited about something, it is so easy to learn to share. And so these are great examples in early career development that you can start to gain some traction in things that will be helpful for you, not only in your job, but in your life.
Mm-hmm. Enthusiasm is
that was my
an
sermon,
amazing,
by the way.
yeah.
Sorry.
Enthusiasm is your friend when you're interviewing
Yeah.
and when you're doing any of this, because we all want to be surrounded by people who are positive and have an enthusiastic outlook. So that's already going to give you a leg up as you're going forward. All right, let's move on. So we got time to look at those resumes at the end, because I just looked up at the clock, and yeah, shockingly, Sherry, you and I could talk all night.
Yeah, we can and we can't. So I'll shut up and you work.
No. You keep chiming in. We'll just keep it moving along. So here's some examples: computer skills, activities, kind of special skills, strong written communication skills, important things to be able to show. And when you put that in your resume, make sure you're ready to back that up in the interviewing, because that might be one of the first questions that gets asked. Is, oh, you enjoy public speaking? Tell me about that. All right. Show me some of your past written work that gives you that feeling that you have strong communication skills. All right, next slide. So typically for internships and that sort of thing, if you're handing them a resume, they will ask you for references. Now, obviously, if this is an online thing that requires references, then you've got to go ahead and put that in. But you always, when you get your resume done, the thing you need to do in parallel with that is get your list of references together as well. And the one thing you cannot forget to do is go and ask everyone that you want to be a reference if they will be a reference for you. And that seems obvious, and it seems like no one in the history of the world has never done that. But I believe Sherry will back me up that it is interesting sometimes, the responses you get from references. Not all the time, it's 1% of the time, but there are people who do not check to make sure they're going to get good references, and you need to do that.
Yeah.
You want to have, as much as possible, professional references, at least one professional, one academic if you're a student. Want your references to be family members if you can avoid that. All right. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that's really important in terms of choose your references well, even if you're choosing your reference to write a letter for your internships or things like that, because people that are not all that enamored or know you well, it'll be a very bland kind of, strained letter, and boy, the reader can tell it. So, they'll say, sure, I'll write a letter for you. You don't see it. And if you don't have a good relationship with that person, or they don't have some idea about who you are and your work, you're going to just get the generic copy paste in, and it's not necessarily going to be something that's going to spur you on in terms of getting the kinds of things that other people are competitively inputting. So in terms of having good internships. So anyway, just think about that in terms of who you're picking, and plan way in advance to ask for that letter and have that relationship built, not just coming up last minute. Oh, can you write me a letter? That's not going to go well.
Yeah, and your primary selection criteria is, who do you have a good relationship with that you can imagine being enthusiastic on your behalf, rather than the person who is the biggest wow factor, the biggest name. Because if you get the professor with the longest set of initials at the end of his or her name, that's not, and it's a bland reference, that's not as good as that young professor or someone else who knows you better that can be specifically enthusiastic, and if we actually do call and talk to them, can give us examples that make us feel like they really are serious about you, and they just haven't met you once or twice. All right, next slide. All right, things you don't have to include on a resume, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. You don't have to talk about race, religion. You don't have to talk about any of these things. Please do not make employment demands on your resume or list reasons for leaving the job. I went ahead and underlined those. Like, please don't do that. All right, next slide. All right, this is so important. I copied it and stuck it in twice in this presentation, because again, we dove down into details, but let's not forget, at a high level, you want to pass that 15-second test, and you want to be clean and concise. You want to make life easy for the reader. You want to be correct and make sure there's no mistakes of any time. My favorite example of this is a young lady I had when I was teaching. Was the co-op professor, and she wanted to, it was a work experience, and she had worked in the factory one summer, and it was a really good experience to have on your resume. And so she had a sentence to the effect that she had never missed a regularly scheduled shift. She hadn't been sick. She had not skipped. She had not overslept. She was always on time. She was there. Now, the problem with it is that for that particular sentence, she left the letter F out of the word shift. Now that sentence means something completely different and really funny, as Sherry is correctly laughing.
I just saw
And
Rex
she
get
did.
it.
You know, yeah, that's right. That's why I pause. I let everybody get it. Now, spell check isn't going to cover that, because if you take the F out of shift, it's still a word. And your eyeball isn't going to get it because you know the word you want on that resume, but you need to show it to somebody, a friend, a family, somebody you trust, and they will catch that. And once they start laughing, they will help you and show you what it is that you missed. But I guarantee you, if you're working hard on this one page and you've jammed all the information that is you down here, and you've worked your butt off and you've revised and revised several times, there will be something on there that you are blind to, that you cannot even see anymore. A small mistake that will be caught by someone else, but would never be caught by you.
And also, do not write your resume or anything important at 3 a.m., sleep deprived, or after you've had adult beverages. You wanted those to be keep out zones. Do not go there.
Yeah. And again, use the resources at your university, because there's a wealth of resources there to help you with resumes and to prepare for interviewing that we're going to be talking about here in a minute. Take advantage of that. All right, next slide.
Another good question just came up. What about disabilities?
Mm-hmm.
Could it be add credence to your academic or professional accomplishments, Brian? I know that's a really fine line.
And you're saying exactly, yes, it can. And you know, be delicate and put it in there, and that can be very impressive. That you know, it was hard enough for me to get a 3.3 in aerospace engineering without having anything that I had to struggle to overcome, other than sometimes my own not understanding what was on the page in front of me. So yeah, but you're walking a fine line. You don't want to give someone a reason not to interview you, but when you put that down there in a positive light, and this is where you go and make use of the resources you have at the university, and you talk to trusted friends, trusted family, and trusted professionals to say, can I say this in a way that sends the right message? And then that opens the door for you to be able to talk about that in the interview. And that's a great thing to be able to talk about, how you're being successful. Overcoming obstacles to be successful is a great way to handle those behavior-based interview questions. To be able to talk about situations where you had to struggle and be successful is a very good thing to have for your interview.
And Johnny brought up another good point earlier, dropping that if you're a veteran. I mean, there's a lot of things that if you have special experience or extraordinary experience where you've actually done service to the country, you've overcome, hurdles in terms of disabilities and things like that. I mean, those are success stories, and those are, appreciation stories to where you should call those out. Those are really things to be proud of. So anyway.
Absolutely. Yeah. I used to have students that didn't think it was important to, they had grown up on a farm and they had spent their whole life doing chores at 6 a.m. and fixing the tractor and doing repairs, around keeping the farm running. Like, no, put that stuff in there. You can make that a job, because it really is as powerful and meaty as a job. Hey, there's nothing, if you're going to be an engineer and go into a factory type environment, for the employer to know that you can get your hands dirty and that you can get in that environment and be able to take care of yourself, not be a liability, very important. Obviously, military experience would give you that impression as an employer as well. So it's very important to put that stuff on.
And also know any baggage that may be attached to terms you use. Like sometimes I get asked, what are you? And I say, I'm a disruptor. Well, I'm a disruptor in education in terms of new ways of educating, but that could be, oh, you're a troublemaker. Well, that's true too, but you've got to make sure whatever you're using, there's not a vernacular or a slang or something else that could be interpreted different ways. So
and I just saw something come up about taking care of a sick family member, a loved one, and I think that That's absolutely a great story to
Yep.
have in your interview, and how you put that on the resume, you need to be very careful about. But it's absolutely a go-to story for interview questions.
And I think elder care, and I'm talking to you, Kristen, I think elder care and those kinds of things that call out your responsibility and your accountability and your extraordinary um, job that you've done is not a bad thing at all. I think that is something that more and more and more is resonating with today's generation. So I would look at that as an employer, as a bonus, as a positive, that
Yeah.
you actually did something like that. So just saying.
All right, resume do's. Make sure you put all the pertinent information in there and go over with as many people as possible. What is the key information I want to have in there? This is not a what I did on my summer vacation, so it's not a first person account. You are free to use phrases and to eliminate all dead words that don't add meaning or don't paint that clear picture in the reader's mind. Your AP English teacher is not going to be reviewing this resume, so you need to just communicate clearly. The attractive layout, being kind to the reader in every way you can is important. And just edit, re-edit, and get feedback. And use the space on the page wisely. As scientists or engineers, we are only as good as our ideas will only be taken seriously if we can communicate them well. So this resume is your first opportunity to show the potential employer that you can communicate well. Next slide. So with the opposite side of the coin is don't be too wordy. Don't be negative. And sometimes we don't recognize we're being a little bit negative or being a little passive when we could be active. So have other people look and ask them, am I being positive? Or am I being as positive as I can be? Keep your format consistent. Make it easy for me to find the key information that I want, which maybe means that I'm highlighting key pieces of information that I want the reader to see throughout my resume. Lead your reader on. If I've got a stack of 100 resumes, I'm happy to be led through your resume by you. Let you show me the key things you want me to see right off the top. And I think the rest of those are self-explanatory. Let's go on to the next slide.
Well, that concludes the resume portion of the slides. So
Oh, good. We get to have fun now?
we do.
All right.
Hey, Brian, you made it through the 87 slides so far. It's pretty good.
Nice.
Only
I
120
don't
more
know
to go.
about any of the rest of you, and I was never naturally a public speaker, although I am outgoing and I do have fun when I'm in a comfortable environment like this. But, it's always been amazing to me, whatever presentations I give or whenever I talk professionally, like you get started, you're in it, and then all of a sudden, oh, we're done? I didn't realize. It's like going on a roller coaster ride. The next thing you know, you're pulling up to get off. What happened here? Okay.
All right. So is there any particular sample resume that you'd like me to pull up first, or you just want me to just pull one up and you'll
Surprise
take it from there?
me.
Surprise you. Okay, well, let's look at.
Let me rephrase that. Pick one of the three I've seen. No, you have surprised me. That's one of the ones you sent that I hadn't looked at late this afternoon, isn't it? Okay.
Oh, well, so these are the same ones that you saw, just with altered names to protect the.
Okay, and you actually did a great job with this, because now
Well,
Lord Jon Snow of HBO fame.
I'll give complete credit to Jessica, because Jessica was working on these. So thank you, Jessica.
Thank you, Dan. Yeah, I put in an Easter egg here on this on this resume, and if anybody finds it, I will be super impressed.
Type in the chat if
Okay.
you do, but let's go ahead.
So I know that I have no problem with the top of this, and if you've got a LinkedIn account up there, that's great. I will give you Lord Commander, but remember we talked earlier about being professional and how we do things. So, I know that this was changed for entertainment value, but you would want to probably change that if that really was how you're being contacted in LinkedIn. So again, and I talked right off the bat about not really liking the objective or the summaries, but the way the resumes are done, and I think this is something you all do at ASU, because all three of these are ASU students, right? And so you've got them putting a summary up at the top, and I like that that it's a summary and not an objective. And so here, clearly telling you right at the top, I'm a mechanical engineer, I'm in the honors college, and I'm looking for an industry internship for the summer. So again, I could tell you that you don't need that because you're not really adding new information, but you've told me some key things I want right at the top, so you've been kind to me as the reader. It's easy to see what the major is. It's easy to see what the GPA is. And one thing I'd like to point out here is you really don't need to go beyond the 10th place for GPA. 3.4 is fine. You don't have to go 3.4, 3, 4, 5, 9. That's too many digits. It's not providing any extra information. Highlighted that you did some education abroad, pulled out the honors. Now, the thing I noticed that you guys are doing here for ASU is that you go ahead and put the honors and awards right there because they tend to be education oriented, and that makes logical sense. So in terms of flow, that's absolutely fine. You're also pulling out technical skills that I might be interested in right at the top. And the positive of that is if I see the skill in there I'm looking for, now I'm much more excited quickly to take a look at the resume. The downside of that is if I don't see the skill I want there, I might move on without looking at the professional experience. So I'm not saying one way or the other, I'm just trying to give you an idea of what the pros and cons can be the way you lay something out. And if you take a look at the professional experience here, there's great stuff in here. There's all kinds of design experience and challenges and team activity and Engineers Without Borders. It's all very good stuff on here. The one thing I circled is that this is listed as professional experience. And so if I really want to get nitpicky, it's certainly degree relevant experience. Some of this is academic, so I might be a little, I'm really picking at nits here, but I might take issue with the fact that you're listing it as professional. If you said this is degree relevant experience and you're putting both academic and workplace stuff, then there's no way I can take issue with it. And I'm really picking at nits in saying that to begin with. But I'm looking down here. I tried to write some notes on these, and one of the questions I had was whether the bullets were even needed, because the sentences do stand out fine on their own, but this format is consistent. It makes it easy to read, so there's no real problem with that. If I go down to under the engineering projects in the community, and I read this sentence, designed a geothermal cooling system to a greenhouse that issued to teach refugees. There's something with that sentence that isn't ringing true to me. So there's either maybe a little tweak that needs to be clear at what you meant. I'm not sure. Maybe the phrase "that issued" is something that's left over from editing. But I'm thinking what you're saying is you designed a geothermal cooling system for a greenhouse to teach refugees and school children about how to do these systems and how to work with them. So there could be a little cleaning up of that sentence, but we're really getting down into the weeds here. This is a very good resume. Memberships and affiliations, if you want to continue to scroll, and Sherry or Dan or anybody else that wants to make any points, jump in. I thought that the one question I had is when you get down to the English speaking teacher here, down at the bottom of memberships and affiliations, that really is a job and a professional experience. So my first thought was, why isn't that up above? And then later on, I'm thinking, well, up above is all really degree related stuff, so you separated that out. But the fact that it was down here and you listed that stuff up there as professional experience at least made me have to think about it a little bit.
And Brian?
Yeah.
One of the things I was posting in the chat earlier in terms of having another category for students, especially for internships, is a category called applied experience. And so that could be previous internships, that could be La Space Academy, it could be a lot of other things to where you're applying professional type experiences in your preparation.
Yeah.
Or applied.
As an employer, the word professional tends to mean workplace to me.
Right.
And I think to most employers, that's what they're going to say. So if you had used what you're saying, Sherry, or you called it degree relevant experience,
sure,
then I don't have that disconnect in my mind as an employer.
We use the word applied because it tends to be an action word in terms of this is something you did, and or that you was project based, it was an internship, it was something you did outside of coursework per se, that was preparatory in your career development. So that's something along that line. Make it seem different than just you took a class.
Yeah.
That's passive. Do something that shows some action and something that you had to actually exert effort and have a product produced. And that
Mhm.
might, you might also call that out with LaSpace. You all you all took your idea, your mission concept to a PDR, preliminary design review. Don't necessarily use the or at least define it in terms of the acronym, but that a PDR in the technical fields, they know what that is and they know the level of effort. So this is
I was going to
something
say,
that,
as an engineering employer, I know if you have gone through anywhere close to a realistic design review, that you've gained some very valuable
right,
experience. And I'm now more interested in reading the rest of your resume.
right, you're going to be doing things that other people haven't, and that's
Mhm.
something that will plus you up.
And getting back down to the stuff at the bottom, that's really, now that I'm interested because of the academic success and these great engineering experiences that you have here, I'm now looking down here and saying, okay, here's what I know. I know that you're not afraid to go to new places, that you're not afraid of stepping out of your comfort zone, because you've gone halfway around the world to teach English. And I know that you can communicate well because you've been a counselor, and you have interpersonal skills to deal with little problems and situations that can arise associated with being a counselor, and that you have some leadership skills. So now I'm very interested in interviewing, and so that's why it's so important to sort of finish it out. It's sort of the exclamation point at the end of the sentence when you can show these interpersonal skills and other activities.
Well, and I'd also rate, in terms of the resumes I've read, you can have a resume that's purely academic. You can
Mhm.
have a resume that's academic with just your university experience in terms of something different. You can have a resume that has something that shows you stepped out of your comfort zone of just being at your campus and did something different. Or you can get a high profile, um, major company or something that you actually stepped into being a candidate, at a company to be taking an internship. They're basically test driving you to see if you're worth hiring. So there's different levels of ways that you can be additive towards your resume by thinking about the experiences that you're adding to. And Brian, when we took the data from the workforce development, our annual report that we did, where we
Mhm.
asked mentors, and we had done this as part of our surveys. Would you rather hire somebody who has an amazing academic career but has never done anything besides that? Or would you take somebody who's maybe not stellar in terms of the absolute pinnacle of a 4.0, but has done an internship? What would you hire? And it was hands down the internship person. They've actually stepped outside of their comfort zone and they've done something that was
Mhm.
applying towards their real goals. And
I interviewed
they
with
had it.
I interviewed with Cummings out in the Phoenix area when I was an undergrad, when I was graduating, and I had I think at that time I graduated with about a 3.4 GPA, and so the guy that was interviewing me said that was about the highest GPA he would interview, because they specifically are looking for people that were not just successful in the classroom, but had an actual life while they were in college. And of course, this is back in the 80s, so there was a little less politically correct. He's like, I want to know that you have already gotten drunk a couple of times and you're not going to go crazy when you get your first job and you come here. And
Wait a minute. That doesn't mean Phoenix is a big, alcohol center.
I'm just telling you what
Is
the
that
guy
what you're
said.
saying? It's not.
I'm
And
just telling you what he said.
I don't want the 4.0s believing they have no life. I know a lot of people in the
No.
4.0s that are actually just amazing people and well-rounded, but be
Yep.
thinking about, again, showing other things that you do besides just school, and
Right.
having, some experiences or volunteer or hobbies or something that shows you actually are more well-rounded. I think that's important.
Hmm. Yeah. All right, I'm looking up at the clock, and we have a whole other thing to talk about. And how much time do we have left, Dan?
15
about-
minutes. About 15 minutes in the regular show, right? Right, Dan?
Yes, we do. I was going to say 45, but no, 15. You're right. Just having too much
Not
fun.
doing math. You've had too long a day. I know. You worked too hard today. But
Okay,
yeah.
so we can go ahead and continue then with the slideshow.
Yeah, and I know were the other two people whose resumes were on there. We could always talk. You guys know what to tell them with their resumes. They were excellent resumes.
Well, there's always the after show.
That is true. We can do that. All right, moving on.
Yeah. So just before I do share the screen, so just so y'all know, we were also going to look at Daenerys Targaryen and Gendry Baratheon.
Jessica.
Nice. There's a theme going on here. Yeah, you had to show that. Otherwise
Yeah.
the theme makes sense. Go back to the middle one.
There we go.
Yeah.
Did you just want to see that she lived on Castle Black Road in Winterfell?
Yeah, that was nice. Okay, we can move on now.
Okay.
All right.
Okay, so then now we're moving on to the interview process.
Okay, so this is the thing that tends to scare people more than the resume, and I want to tell you it shouldn't, particularly if you're a student and you are going for internships or even your first job, because the employers understand that you've not done a million interviews yet. So when you're in the room with them, they want you to be successful. So you're not typically going to have a hostile environment. You're going to have people there that are trying to pull out of you all the information they need to make a good decision. And Sherry, you can tell me if you agree with me, but I'm probably a little closer to the one on the left than definitely not the one on the right. You would not want to see me interpretively dance anything.
No, that's for sure.
All right, next slide.
Yeah.
All right. First of all, yeah, it's not rocket scientist. Take a deep breath. Here's the key: be in the present. Just pay attention, be observant. Look at the cues that you're going to be getting from those who are doing the interviewing. They are going to be on your side, and you're going to be able to tell whether you're answering their questions. Don't worry about it if they stop and write some notes down. They have to take notes because they're probably going to interview a whole bunch of people, and if they don't take notes, they will not remember who is who. This is Georgia Tech's favorite saying: students who prepare for interviews end up landing the best job. So do your homework, know about the company. If you've got questions that show that you have researched that company or that particular place of internship, and you can tie what they do to stuff you're interested in, you have hit you're golden. You want to show enthusiasm, and you don't want that enthusiasm to be fake. And the best way to do that is to have done your homework, know what that employer is, and be honestly enthusiastic about it. And don't forget, by the way, you're interviewing them just as they are interviewing you. Even if the job sounds like the coolest job in the world, every place of employment has its own culture. Think of it as its own personality. And if the personality and the way they do things in their culture is going to constantly be 180 degrees different than the way you tend to do things, it might not be a good fit for you. So you're interviewing them as well. Let's go on to the next slide. So again, what's everybody's purpose when they're here? Remember, the organization just wants to get to know you. They want to learn more about your abilities and your talent and experience. They want to share, and particularly if you're going for an interview, they want to be mentoring you and share some of their expertise. They're typically excited about what their company does and what they do, and they want to tell you about that. And so you give them a chance, they will be enthusiastic back to you about what the opportunity is going to be like. And they're there, they will provide you honest guidance. And the bottom line is they're trying to determine if your knowledge and skills and your personality fit well with their organization. All right, next slide. So your goal, same thing in reverse, right? You want to become acquainted with that organization. You've hopefully done your homework and you know what they do and what specific things are going on, but you want to try now get a feel from these people, what's the personality of the workplace like? You want to understand how they've utilized interns before if you're going for an internship. And you always want to present yourself as capable and worthy and excited and honestly enthusiastic about their company and the opportunity that they're presenting. Next slide. So tips. Already talked about the voicemail thing. Assume the companies are going to call you. Make sure your message is professional. Don't be cute when you're introducing yourself. Don't be flippant. Do all that stuff. All right, go on to the next slide. When they call you for the interview, that the last thing on that slide was important. Write down where you're supposed to be, when you're going to be there. You never know when you're going to have an electronic issue, so make sure you've got the information you need in more than just your smartphone. So before the interview, collect your thoughts about yourself. What are the abilities and skills that you think fit that particular internship or job opportunity? That's what you're going to, you don't want to just generically say, I'm strong at this, I'm a good communicator. You want to be able to tie those good communication skills to some specific task or something specific about that company and that opportunity. What part of your work experience do you think connects to that? What part of your academic experience connects to that? Rehearse. It's okay to be nervous. It's really okay to be nervous. You have to practice. And I think I also said, what can I do to improve interviewing? Do mock interviews. If there's one thing I could tell you that you absolutely should take advantage of at your school is go find out if they have any capability to do a mock interview with you. If you think you're great, go do a mock interview. You might find out you're just good and there's still a few things you can do to be better. If you think you're terrible, go do a mock interview. You'll discover you're not as bad as you think you are, but you'll be able to figure out those specific things you can do to get better.
Hey, Brian?
Yes, yeah.
And just to kind of backtrack just a tiny bit, back there when you were talking about, voicemail and things like that, social media is fair game. And I know right now there are employers that go in and search you, see where you are, see what's on your pages, whatever they can see that's public facing, but they do due diligence in terms of seeing if you're a loose cannon and you're just, mouthing off about everything, or if you're professional. So make sure not only your LinkedIn, looks good, but also wherever else you have accessible social media. That is something that can be a real deal breaker right off the bat in terms of people. So just be aware of that.
And not only things that you've recently posted, go back, through your Twitter feed from 5 years ago, if you had Twitter back then, and you're certainly a different person today than you were 5 years ago. So maybe you weren't exactly posting the right things then. So
all I know is I'm very thankful that in my youth I did not have the opportunity to permanent documentation.
That's because we're old, Brian.
Yeah. Well, in this case, I am grateful.
Carrier pigeons those messages didn't stay very long, so it's okay.
We could take down our tweets simply by burning whatever piece of paper it had been written on. Yeah. Okay. But rehearsing is a good thing. Doing a mock interview, if you can, is a great thing to do. So things to do on the interview day. This is Lombardi time. You want to be there 15 minutes early. You do not risk being late. You don't want to dress. You want business professional attire. This is not the same thing as date night, no matter what your gender is. This is business professional. You want to be neat and well groomed. You might want to get a haircut. Don't chew gum. I emphasize, if you're nervous and you're chewing gum, you're going to be chewing that gum 50 million miles an hour, and that's going to be the most irritating, distracting thing in the world. Bring copies of your resume, other references in case they're going to ask for it, other things you think you might have. There were some good questions the last time we did this about if you've got some sort of portfolio of things, if that makes sense, and it's something that you can bring in a nice professional binder with you, go ahead and have it. Doesn't mean you necessarily have to pull it out and use it, but you've got it at the ready in case the situation goes that direction. It's okay to bring notes, and It's okay to bring a list of questions you would like to ask the company. That kind of shows that you've done your homework. It's a visible way to show you did your homework. And put things in a nice notebook again so that you have that professional appearance. Next slide. The interview starts when you get out of your car, wherever it is, to go into the interview. So be aware that you need to treat everyone, not just the person that you're interviewing with as much respect as you can. So be extra polite. You want to establish eye contact. You want to smile. It's amazing what eye contact and a smile will do to give that enthusiastic, positive image that you're trying to get. Follow the lead, and particularly if you're a student and they're interviewing you as an intern, follow their lead. They're there to help you. They're not trying to trip you up. So you'll be able to tell as you answer a question, you're going to be able to see on their face that, yeah, this is what I was going for. Or if you think maybe you haven't quite hit it, go ahead and say, hey, did I give you the information you were looking for? This is something you're working together to pass information back and forth. Don't be afraid to pause. Here's a really important thing. You know, early on, one of the first slides said, be in the present. Well, the hardest thing about being in the present is that you are always in your mind coming up with the next thing you're going to tell them. And if you're spending time rehearsing the next thing you're going to say, you're not listening to the person that's talking. So you need to try and do the best you can to stay focused and listen, take their question, and then it's okay. I don't know of any employer that thinks it's a bad thing for you to pause and gather your thoughts for a second in an interview. An interview is a little bit stressful. Pausing, gathering your thoughts is not a negative, it's a positive. It means I am calm, cool, and collected. I'm going to gather my thoughts and tell you and give you as much of the information as you just asked for. So don't feel like you've got to plan ahead what you're going to say. Listen to them, listen to what they're saying to you, process it, and then answer back. Do the best you can to be speaking well of everyone, even when you're telling those stories in the behavior-based interview questions about, tell me a time when you had to work with someone that was difficult for you to get along with, and how did you handle that? You don't want to talk about them overly negatively. You want to keep things in the most positive light you can. Be sure to speak well about your school, your employers. Try to avoid saying anything negative. And exhibit enthusiasm. Be attentive and interested, and you will be in very good shape. Really important to have questions prepared on your own. Most people don't do that. And it seems like it's like common sense isn't as common as you might think it should be. Being prepared is as common as it should be. So having good questions to ask is really critical from the employer standpoint, because it shows that you were serious and very interested in them. All right. Be yourself. Don't try to be somebody you're not. Just be the best version of yourself you can be. Put yourself in the most positive lights possible. If you spend a lot of time trying to be what you think they want you to be be successful in the interview, what's the worst thing that could happen? You actually get the job, and then you got to pretend to be that person for the next 6 months. That's an awful lot of work. And it's typically not going, they're going to see through that very quickly. Be yourself. Use your personality to your advantage. Maintain eye contact, listen, be positive. Next slide. I say looking at the clock and seeing we got about 4 minutes left. Speak clearly and audibly. Don't be afraid to share your goals and interests. They're actually looking, the internship is a relationship. They need to know what you want to get from them, and they want to see that what you want to get is actually tied to their company, their interests, and what you will be able to do for them. So don't be afraid to share your goals and interests. And if you've done your homework, you can now tie your goals and interests to what they do because you've researched them a little bit. And at the end of the interview, express some appreciation. Thank them for their time. And be enthusiastic from beginning to end. Next slide.
Okay, so the next slide jumps into tip 5, but somebody pointed out, thank you, Matt, pointed out that we skipped tip 2, and that was my fault. So this was just prior to the interview. I know you covered the second slide of this, but just wanted to make sure we didn't miss anything important here.
I was thinking that there was something that I had forgotten about, but yeah, we covered most of these points. But yeah, and these slides will be available to them afterwards, right?
Yep. Okay, thanks.
So I think you did no real harm, sir. After the interview, Sherry, you're going to back me up on this. If you send a thank you email, sadly, you are way ahead of the curve on everybody else.
That's such a small effort for a lot of return.
Yeah, it's huge. So
Paying
express
attention.
that enthusiasm.
Yeah.
And then whatever your action items were from that, do it. If they wanted you to send them transcripts, references, whatever you didn't have, if they wanted some different work samples, make sure you get that to them right away. Don't let that slip several days. And then be ready to wait, because they're not going to make a decision tomorrow. They've got a lot of people that they're interviewing. The supervisors tend to be busy with their actual day-to-day job, and they can't always do it as quickly as you want. I know that was the biggest thing when I was running the co-op program at Cincinnati. Once the resumes went out, I could usually count on the second day being the first email I would get from somebody saying, I haven't heard from anybody yet. You're not gonna get an answer in 24 hours. And if you do, that's great for you, but it doesn't happen very often. So be prepared to wait. And that's one of the questions you can ask them at the end. Ask them how they think the process is going to go, and that you're not going to hold them to it, but can they give you a feel for, is it going to be a few weeks, or would it be longer than that, or would it be quicker than that? And then if they've given you an idea that it's going to be 2 weeks, don't send them any emails at least for that 2 weeks. If after the 2 weeks you haven't heard from them, you can find a polite way to maybe ask if there's any more information you could provide. You just want to be very gentle, and you want to be very positive in any kind of follow-ups you do.
Unless you have another offer, and that's legitimate. This is not like, oh, I'm just going to tell them I have an offer, see if they'll jump on taking me on. Which goes to another point too, in terms of the samples and the reference, the portfolios and things you're showing. Make sure you are transparent about what your portion of the work is. If it was a team effort, you can talk about the team, the level of effort, and hey, I contributed X, and this was my tasks on the team. Don't necessarily make it look like you did everything if you did not. It will come back to haunt you. So make sure you're credible. You cite sources or other people that have contributed. That is going to be something that will get you farther than saying, oh, I did all of this. You just want to make sure you're being honest.
Yeah, that's a really good tip, because this is the place where you're highlighting what you do. But as an interviewer, if all I heard is I did this and I did that, or you get in any kind of negative about other people on your team, you've kind of sunk yourself right off the bat. Because if you're a little bit negative in this interview setting, what are you going to be like for the next 6 months working in my organization? What are you going to be saying about me behind my back and my coworkers behind their back? And
the other thing about the number one want I'm getting from all of the aerospace companies and all the mission teams is they want people that know how to work on teams. If you are constantly saying I and look at me, that is not going to bode well in terms of them thinking that you're going to work well on a team. So you want to think about that. Go ahead, Brian.
That's why it's kind of important to sort of think ahead of time. What are some key stories that I might want to tell in this interview about myself? And if you've thought them through a little bit ahead of time, and you've used the STAR method, you set up the situation, you've then defined what the task was, and then you talk about the actions that you took and the results that came out of it. If you thought this through a little bit, then you can put things in the most positive light, and you can have that nuance of showing that you did some important things, but that you did it as part of a group. If you're inventing these stories on the fly, a lot of times you get so focused in on just the stuff you did that you give that wrong impression.
And also be ready for the questions. I know Sonny brought this up, and when he was talking about his initial interview, where, tell us about a situation that you had to make choices and things didn't go well. I mean, again, you need to be thinking about things that you can show there were strengths, or there was, things that you had to do and lessons you learned from it, or ways that you adjusted, your attitudes or your, you know, the way you did things. Those are the kinds of things that are going to be more of a stress test to say, this isn't all about, I just want to know, tell me when you screwed up something, you know, basically. And you've got to be thinking about that and have that in your hip pocket in terms of a way that you can bring that out and not just be flattened with it and not know what to say or say something that you didn't intend to. So,
and Dan, we might want to go ahead to some more slides because I know it's after the top of the hour already. And
oops.
I saw the question about the STAR method, and I was thinking, did we skip that slide? No, we hadn't got to it yet.
Oh.
No, it's coming
This
up
PowerPoint will be out
next.
there for everybody, so you can
Yeah.
get that. But
Yeah.
I know the biggest scariest part of this is these behavior-based interview type questions where they're looking for a story from you. And so I was jumping ahead thinking we were running out of time here. And here's where it's a good idea to just ahead of time think about what are those things you want to highlight about yourself, and then come up with a handful of stories that you've sort of prepared so that you'll be able to tailor these stories to some of those kinds of behavior-based questions that you might get looking for a situation. So go ahead on to the next slide. I'm going to kind of go through these fairly quickly because I don't know if people need to fall off the line. Here's that STAR technique I was talking about. And it's just one of those sort of mnemonic devices that helps you remember. You want to lay out the situation. And here's the mistake we all make. We spend a lot of time, particularly those of us that are scientists and engineers, defining the situation really well and the task goal really well. And then we might do okay about some actions, and then we forget to say what the result was. That's why it's really important to have thought about these stories ahead of time so you can balance it out and you can do all four of these things in one story. I make that mistake all the time. I'm telling you the mistake I make. Go on to the next slide. Let's go to the next slide because it's really hard to do examples on a slide. You know, so some of these tricky questions, what's your biggest weakness? And so a tip for that is, all right, when somebody says, what is your biggest weakness? The first thing you want to do is, for God's sakes, don't tell them what you think your biggest weakness actually is. Don't do that. But you want to find a weakness that you can turn into a positive at the end. You want to talk about, oh, I'm such a perfectionist, but you're going to enjoy that with me because my perfectionism will be leading to great work. And I'm exaggerating for effect here. You don't want to be, that over the top. But you want to include you want to be able to tell a story about this weakness in a way that you can talk about how you're overcoming it and how you're going to eventually turn that into a strength. All right, go to the next slide. So what do I want to be doing for 10 years? And when you get a question like this, really the employer is looking to say, okay, is where you want to evolve in your career something that we can see happening to benefit us as a company? So think about how you can tie goals you might have over 10 years into things that would be a positive for the company that you're interviewing. And keep in mind, when interviews are asking you these hypothetical questions, they're not necessarily, looking to see that you get the hypothetical correct answer. They're just trying to figure out your thought process. How do you problem solve? How do you apply your strengths to situations? And so just think of it that way and don't get too fixated on coming up with the correct answer. Next slide. So your greatest strength, this is an opportunity, by the way. Don't just come up with a list of strengths that you have. They could have seen that in our resume. Take this opportunity to show your communication skills by tying your strengths into something they care about. I'm preparing for this interview. I really like this example. I actually think there's several things I feel allow me to make a significant contribution to your company. That's the kind of thought process you want to put into the story you're going to tell when you're talking about it. Next slide. And again, if you get these random brain teasers, they're mostly looking to understand how you think and how you step through to solve problems. So take a deep breath. Again, you have a chance to pause and think about things. And then show them the logical steps you're working through because they probably care more about understanding your reasoning and your thought process than they are in you getting the right answer in the end. Next slide. Okay, so I did have a couple of sort of wrap-up slides from an employer. This was a a manager with General Electric aircraft engines in Cincinnati. And I thought it was a good way to sort of end the scary subject of interviews and resumes in a positive note, and just remind you all, the employer's in this with you. They want you to be successful, particularly when you're looking for an internship. You know, they want you to be successful. And so, you know, she came to us and talked to my students. This was probably 10 years ago. And they're looking for well-rounded students. So don't be afraid to show those leadership things and things we talked about. And be ready in the interview to substantiate and tell stories about some of those things you put on the resume. Always be honest. And as an employer and someone that has done a lot of interviews in the past, it's amazing. You know, if you do 100 interviews, there's going to be a few people that think they can lie and get away with it, and they usually cannot. So be honest. Next slide. It's okay to be nervous. Just sit back, be ready to answer a variety of questions, and make sure that you ask the interviewer questions. And here's another employer basically telling you what I was telling you before and what Sherry was telling you. It's important to have some questions, have researched the company. They really are looking for that, and they really want you to show enthusiasm. I know for me, when you know, we're looking for interns at NASA, we're looking for those that are really enthusiastic about the mission that's going on with NASA, because we're enthusiastic about it. And bring resumes with you to the interview. Next slide. So I'm always amused by this, because she feels that, you know, if the employer feels it's necessary to tell you to not fall asleep at your desk, that means that there is probably more than one student that has fallen asleep at their desk. So be there, you know, show up early, work a little late. Once you get the internship, you are now on a 15-week, 10-week, 6-month interview. So make sure when you're on the job, you dress a little better than the average person, and that you're there for the full amount of time that you're there, and that you are, you know, walking that fine line between bugging people too much, but making sure that they give you as much work to do as you can handle. And it's never bad to ask questions. All right, next slide. I don't know if you guys can hear that, but my dog over on the couch is snoring really loud.
We can't hear it. It's okay.
All right, I know we've run over time, so we can't have the fun Q&A we had last time, but I did want to leave with these key things about NASA internships. Intern.nasa.gov is the portal for the majority of internships. And you know, if you go there right now, you can apply for the summer. You can also apply for the fall and the spring. And I encourage people who want to work at NASA to think about applying for semesters, not just summers. Because in the summer, it will be you and 5,000 or 6,000 of your closest friends applying for jobs. In the spring and fall, it will be you and 500 or 600 of your closest friends applying for jobs. So y'all are good at math. You can work the math out with that. It's not just that portal, though. Each NASA center has what used to be called a co-op program, or now their HR department, they now call Pathways Internships, to maximize the confusion with the other internships. These are run individually by each NASA center, whether that's Ames out in California, or the Jet Propulsion Lab, or Johnson Space Center down here. So they all have their own times, and so you just gotta pay attention to USA Jobs to see when those open up. They kind of
Brian?
open up sometimes. Yes, ma'am.
Johnny pointed out earlier that NASA has a new, I went and looked at it too. It's force.nasa.com. Have you seen that page?
No.
It's a NASA internship page. You have to go look. Yeah, it's something new, that some new gizmo that somebody got talked into, that rolled out a new page. We know how that goes. Yeah.
If you all want to know what this is me filtering negatives so that I can maintain a positive conversation here. And Sherry is laughing. Yes. And Sherry will tell you about the space grants. Every state has a consortium of universities, and many of those offer internship, either partial or full internship coverage. So that's something you should look into.
That was a really nice recovery, Brian.
Dan, what else can we do to cause you trouble tonight?
I think we still have 80 people in the room, Brian, and
Yeah.
so we could probably do a little Q&A in
Sure.
terms of some people that are willing to just hang on. And also, before we get going, I just wanted to let people know in Academy 2, you all are going to be privy to the only academy that's ever going to be offered Academy 3. Just so you know, we are forming up a new level 2 is going to now become the Proposal Academy, which, since you all had a different level 2, you're going to be offered to be able to take a level 3, which we're going to call the Proposal Academy. So we have the Mission Concept Academy. We'll have the Proposal Academy. NASA has we've been part of a pilot that we are going to take to LaSpace and offer how to actually write a successful proposal for NASA. And so they're seeing that they're getting a lot of ideas, but people do not have the skills or the knowledge on how to write a selectable proposal for ideas. So we are going to put together a 12-week academy that is going to be based on the roadmaps that NASA has in terms of coming up with ideas, the science traceability matrix. You'll be able to look through in terms of the architecture of things that they have on the horizon. Good ideas that may fit within the things NASA wants to do. And so we'll have categories of things that people will be making their teams together and choosing the kinds of things they want to go after. The winning proposal, the winning idea for each session will win $10,000 to seed your project. So NASA's not only wanting to train you, they want to reward. Again, that's not $10,000 you go spend it at Target. This is something that you're going to use as seed money to actually start off the things you're proposing. Okay, so this is real. So we're gonna give a good 12 weeks and mentoring and give you the skill sets, the tool sets, the knowledge, the how to learn the ropes of actually going in and being able to start understanding how you actually take an idea and work it to get it to where it's going. Okay, so let's see, do you still have to be in school? Benjamin, we'll talk about that. I'm still working that out with NASA. Right now, technically, LaSpace is all undergrad, but maybe as an Academy alum, we might be able to allow you in. Okay, so we're working out the details. I just wanted to make sure you all knew about it. Dan, we talked about opening it up a week from Friday in terms of the applications, correct?
Yes, ma'am. I've already posted that in the chat, so expected
Okay.
by April 5th.
Yep.
Some of you want it earlier, sooner than that. We possibly might get that. And we will say, so it's not only is this group invited, but our current level 1 students,
Yep.
which we have over 470 of them, will be applying as well. So we only have 500 seats available for each round. So just be aware.
Well, and just know that we are now overfilling every session we put out. So the good news is that we're going to be running the Proposal Academy along with the Mission Academy every, spring, summer, and fall. So if you miss this one, just apply early. That's what we're trying to get the word out. But if you miss this one, then you can actually go ahead and apply for the next one. And that you were talking about, you're not necessarily going to have the same teams. It's going to be by interest that you're going to formulate teams. So there may be something in the technology roadmap that you really see that you've got some traction on. Maybe you've got some expertise within your university, or you can contribute. You're just really passionate about this area. We're going to work out the rules in terms of the rules of the road for the way the teams will formulate. But we just want to get the word out that this is something NASA's serious about. They're investing in you because they see the potential of this actually getting traction, not only preparing you for your career, but also starting to really think about, you've had a chance to really kind of formulate a concept already. You've had some groundwork. This is a good time to practice and maybe even win that grand prize at the end of the session. So, Anyway,
We also
there's
do
lots
want
of
to,
different things. Go ahead.
sorry, we also want to do just a quick poll for those of you that are still here. If you go to menti.com, just a really quick poll. If you're interested in the Proposal Academy beginning this summer, yes, no, or you're interested and for a different semester. We're just kind of trying to get an idea of how many of you
Okay.
will apply.
And you posted that in the chat. Menti number.
That's in the chat, and I already see some coming in. So
Okay. All right. So with that, Brian, we'll get back to you. We just wanted to make sure we at least gave these folks a heads up, and we're looking forward to actually making this a really cool thing.
And just to give the students a little perspective, there are internal competitions within NASA for our own researchers that they can propose ideas, and that's the same amount of money they get to work on their projects, $10,000. So you guys,
wow.
This is legit.
Legit. I love that word. All right.
Okay, so if we have time for a little after show Q&A, what we can do, I see Kristen is asking not to hang up yet because she wants her questions answered. So Kristen,
okay,
what we'll do is unmute. I was going to say each one, raise your hand if you'd like to ask a question.
All right, we're in the after show. Yep. Go for it, Kristen.
Kristen, you're on.
And thank you, Brian. That was actually like a lot. I took like a couple pages worth of notes from that, so just saying thank you. So can we? You said we'll have different teams, but if we're able to make a proposal this semester of some extent, could we have it at least looked in there with our current team?
If it matches, again, your proposal is going to be based on what NASA wants. You're going to be looking at technical documents to decide a concept that you're going to go after. So it could be the same team. We're not saying it can't be. It's just going to be, again, getting traction in areas. You're going to be looking for subject matter experts outside of your team that are, in the field or have expertise maybe at your university or college or in town, those kinds of things. So there's a lot of pieces and a lot of moving parts that we're going to be cementing down and giving you more information, but we just wanted to give you the teaser right now.
Oh, don't tease me. I'm all excited and pumped up now.
And I actually just posted in the chat, we can schedule a Q&A session about the proposal class another time. If you
we will.
guys have specific questions about that, we can answer those for you and for the current level 1 class. So since Brian, we don't have him here with us every day, let's try to keep these questions focused on Brian's resume and interview.
Sorry,
no, that's absolutely fine, Kristen.
I'm more interested in the other stuff too. So.
Brian wants to take the class too.
What we might get on the space station, eh, Brian?
Yep. We'll have to see if we can figure that out.
So anyway, all right.
Thank
so
you.
we're going to switch gears back over to workforce preparation. And what kinds of things do you want to ask Brian?
I know some of you had questions in the chat earlier. We may not have been able to get to them all. So if your question didn't get answered, now's your chance.
And this has been a long session. Don't feel like you have to. There may be some questions that come up later that you guys can shoot my way and I can get back to answering.
Okay.
But,
well, we have
the whole point was there was a lot of slides there, and so it's deliberately a long slideshow so that information is there in the future. And I think also there was a Word document that was kind of a little more extended version on the interviewing that I think I sent you guys last week.
I'll be sharing that with everyone
There is a question, Brian, that says, do you know if there's any plans, and this is an HR question, any plans to change GS 0800? If you can speak that jargon.
No, I don't even speak that jargon, so I'm not even sure what that is.
Oh, man. Okay. We'll just have to shelve that for now.
So Mithiel had a question, but his microphone's not working. So go ahead and type it in the chat, Mithiel. We'll get your question asked and answered.
And yeah, that's fine. And we're in I don't want to make sure that you guys understand when I said level 3, it's only because you're the team that will have missed the opportunity to have a straight off into the Proposal Academy. So you will have the chance to have 3 experiences. That's all we're listing. Okay.
So we do have a question here from
Yes.
Mithiel related to resumes. How many courses is it acceptable to have if they are all relevant?
Well, now you're doing the space trade-off, right? If you're listing, if you have a whole list of a dozen, classes, now you've diminished the power, you've diluted the power of the ones you really wanted to emphasize, and you've taken up a lot of space on your resume. So, that's what every resume is unique. Every resume is different, but that's the trade-off you're making there. This is a trade-off study. This is your own design review. You're doing a trade-off analysis of what do I gain by emphasizing that many individual courses versus lose from not being able to put the other stuff in there that you won't be able to have room for. They'll do a good job of not directly answering your question, but just giving you a feel for how to think about it.
Here's a good question for you, Brian, from Amos. What about the difference between EAC ABET and ETAC ABET in terms of being eligible for federal service? Do you know that?
I don't know the first two acronyms. I know what it's talking about with ABET, and I assume you're talking about something about, say, for
It's
example,
probably engineering technology.
Yeah,
I bet you that's
say,
it. We talked about that last week.
There are, in order to be eligible at NASA to be, and all the technical civil servants at NASA are defined as aerospace technologists. And there's a list of majors that is blessed by HR and these things qualify you to be an aerospace technologist. And there has been an issue, there is an issue where the engineering tech type programs are not on that list to be a technologist. And so that just determines what GSA pay grade you get on and whether or not you're eligible for certain jobs. And that is a fun nuance of the bureaucracy that you now know everything I know about it.
Okay. There's another question here from John. Should I be nervous of leaving college with only a research experience if I can't find an internship?
Well, I tell people that you should get as much experience as you can, as early as you can, and as often as you can, but that's just adding to your resume. Don't be nervous. You have been successful in school and you have done everything put in front of you, and now go out and figure out what experience you can get that adds to your resume.
Okay, and Valeria wants to know, should we attach a picture? She's a foreign national. She says it's required in resumes in her country, but you haven't mentioned anything about it.
It is not required in resumes in this country. In fact, it's one of those things sort of listed that you do not, by law, have to do, and no one should ask you for that. So in generally speaking, you don't have a picture with your resume. Is there anything you'd want to add to that, Sherry?
You just don't want to give anybody who has any kind of biases any other reason to pick you or not pick you. I mean, that's just making it easy, and people are people, and they may have just been cut off in a parking spot by somebody blonde, and now they hate blonde people. So you don't want to go there. Just give them a chance for revenge when it's not even you.
Yeah.
Alejandro also said, Brian, what do you think about using color in a resume? Do you see it as someone who's trying too hard to stand out, or is it a right level of trying to be different? One advisor told me never to use because your reader may have an eye disorder and is colorblind, so they're not 508 compliant, apparently.
Well, and here's one of the three resumes that you all did have some blue font in it, and when I printed it on my black and white printer to bring home, then some of the lines were lighter looking than the other lines. So that's another reason not to put the color in that. And my final reason would be, you're applying for an engineering or a science position, not a fine arts position. So the key to your resume success is that resume transmits the information as effortlessly as possible for me to read. It's not about how fancy you can be or how creative you can be.
Well, and I want to make sure also, somebody had mentioned about margins and other things. Make sure you print your resume out before you ever send it to anybody to see how it looks. Do not try and squeeze everything you can by using 9 narrow Arial font where it's hardly readable and distinguishable in terms of the font, and making it, you know, again, grumpy reviewers because they have to strain their eyes to read you. Yeah. So
I already need reading glasses to see the type 12 font. So
yeah.
if you're going to give me type 8 font, then now it's like, okay, we're at war rather than me being on your side.
It also shows you.
But Sherry, the one thing I liked about the example resumes was that it was thin margins. The space was used.
Right.
So Sherry's right. You want to make sure the printers are going to print it correctly, but don't be afraid to use all of the space at your disposal.
Just hold that up again, Brian, because one of the things that I see in that is it's well balanced and it's got definition, but you're not having to fight. If you use hardly any margins and you've squeezed as many possible words you can into that white space, that is showing that to me, it's kind of like, well, you're a rule breaker. You're just trying to, you know, jam as much as you can, like having a card you can take into a test and using every single space on there to cram stuff in. Be thoughtful, be strategic, and make sure what you're saying and even the appearance of what you're handing over actually looks professional. So, there's just some things you want to think about.
Yeah, and I've seen some first drafts of resumes where they had 2-inch margins on either side and bulleted right down the middle. And that was, even though there was plenty of space and the words were big, that did not convey to me that they could efficiently communicate all the information they needed to, because they weren't making really good use of the space. They just were in a column in the center of the page.
Right. And I'm seeing some things about, what about playing high school and college sports or in an orchestra? I mean, again, that just shows that you're a team player. You've actually, done some outside kinds of activities versus just, parking yourself at a computer. Hey, I was #1 in the world in Warcraft. That actually could be something that says you have special talents, but you want to make sure you call out the things that are going to be important.
And I would actually say, if you've been in the band or you've done some other things, if, this first example we went over that had the professional experience and had all the degree related stuff, if that's all that's on my resume, those employers that are looking for someone who's well-rounded might say, wait a minute, you've not done anything else. So slipping in a couple of things in here that are not degree specific, but show and go to your working in groups and being social and doing those sort of things adds a lot of value.
What about a cover letter? Jessica's asking, how important is a cover letter, or rather, what situations is it most helpful for the reviewer?
Cover letters are really important. They tend to be less important for interviews because if you're doing the online thing, they're going to ask you those questions that more or less are like a cover letter. Why are you applying for this? Why did you choose the degree you chose? When you get those sort of chop shop questions, it sort of takes the place of the cover letter. But if you're going to do a cover letter, it needs to be specific for the specific employer that you're applying to. A generic cover letter isn't going to add a lot of value.
No.
But what you're doing in that is basically saying, okay, if in 2 paragraphs, what is it I want the reader to take away from this big page that's behind it? And so you're putting a context there. You're saying, here are my strengths. Here is what I'm excited about at your company. So with a cover letter, you're sort of doing a mix between what we talked about with the interview and what we talked about with the resume. You are demonstrating that you've looked into the company a little bit and you have an intelligent reason about why you're applying to that company other than you just simply want a job. You are demonstrating that you think you have some strengths that match up to what you perceive the needs are for that company. And you're just hitting the highlights in a couple of paragraphs.
Okay, it kind of goes back. Gina's talking about how she had a semester, her first year of college, that she was dealing with a very ill family member. Mm-hmm. So how would you bring up the reason your CUME GPA may be lower than a 3.0 while your current semester is higher?
Well, and Sherry, I know you know of an example where someone can, within those questions online, talk about, difficulties, family tragedies, so stuff that's happened that that you've had to pay attention to that while also being successful in school. And frankly, writing a cover letter to help explain that in those paragraphs up front could ease the burden of the stark resume that just shows the lower GPA.
And
what have it.
And what you and I, Brian, know is we've always looked at the trend. Is it trending down or is it trending up? You know, so you can show the recovery is really important. Life happens, things happen, come out of left field and knock you down. You know, that is not out of the ordinary in terms of life experiences. But what you've done since then in terms of that recovery and how you've done self-care to actually address what's going on and not just buried it where it'll resurface later.
Yeah.
You want to be able to say, you know, this was really hard on me. I lost a parent or whatever, but I've been able to, you know, through counseling and through support, I've actually been able to, you know, get better now, and I'm resilient, and I'm really looking forward to making my life count. And those kinds of things are going to be something that people will totally get. And it's the type of thing that you can be honest about and just say, you know, this is what I have to do.
The coolest thing about life is the only way to not succeed is to stop trying. So always demonstrating that you're picking yourself up and you're working to get better. Everyone can relate to that. Everyone can get on your side. Everyone understands that. We are all doing that as we go through life.
Yeah, and I'm just answering Matt here, and I'll just say it out loud. Matt's wondering, you know, are those resumes real resumes that you showed tonight? And yes, Matt, they were. Names have been changed to protect Jessica from, you know, I mean, she, you know, but those, don't compare yourself to other resumes, just like social media. You know, some people have had other experiences, they've had other opportunities. That does not mean that you are deficit in any reason. Don't compare, oh, I'll never be that good, I'm not going to even apply. Do not do that. And do not believe everything you see on social media as the perfect life and I don't have that. Please, please, please believe in yourself. Take the opportunities as you can. You know, go after things that you may have to stretch yourself to get. Do not think that you shouldn't deserve something or don't have the competency to do it. I mean, I wouldn't be here today had I not taken a crazy, wild chance to take something that NASA had put out there and walk through the doorway to try it out and see if I could actually qualify. And that changed my life forever. Just because I wasn't that self-doubter and I wasn't, you know, oh, I could never do that. I live in a town that doesn't even have a stoplight. Why would they ever pick me? You know, you just don't do that. You don't go there because you're going to miss a lot of life. So make sure that you actually go after things, stretch yourself, believe in yourself, have fun, and, you know, take those chances.
And we all have a story like that. I would not be here if I had not basically stubbornly kept waiting for NASA to call for a co-op, and they called on December 7th to start on January 5th. I had to pick up and drive from Kentucky to Hampton, Virginia, and accept that position. And I did it happily, and I was willing to do it. I wasn't afraid to leave home to go wherever. And if I hadn't been ready to take that opportunity, I would not be here talking to you now.
Well, I think there's a lot of things in there, you know, and Mario's asking, what's a cover letter? So I think you could Google some good examples of that, Mario, just to get some ideas. And you always customize it, like Brian said, to what it is you're introducing yourself. And your resume is going to tell everything about you that they want to know, but you might just, you know, say you're excited that you've dreamed about this since you were 5, you know, or whatever. And just, you know, you look forward to the conversation, basically. It's just a personal introduction. So,
you know, talking about stories and perseverance, this is the group that Sunny talked to last week, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So you all
No,
have met.
it's 2 weeks. It was several weeks ago. You talked to Academy One last week.
Okay. All right.
But they know. I mean, you know, again,
Yeah.
your presence in the interview, on interviews on the phone, your excitement, your tone, your clarity in terms of your vision for what you want to do in life, or even within that job, and knowing, that you'd like to be part of things that make a difference, are really going to go far. So anyway, are the Pathways
Right.
internships are not for graduate students, right, Brian? Those are for undergrads.
They're primarily for undergrads. There are some opportunities for recently graduated getting their masters, but they're not as many.
Yeah. There's not. Those are more fellowships and people that are going on into higher ed in terms of grad school. There's different rules. They're all on the NASA site that you can find all those on the internships are just graduate fellowships within NASA. There's all kinds of possibilities there too. We should let you go because it's late, Brian. And the
Thank you.
dog is probably going to wake up from its snoring, wanting, food, something like that.
Well,
So.
thank you all for this opportunity. I thoroughly enjoyed talking, and all of you that are still on the line, this is a great program. Take full advantage of it. Good luck to everybody.
No, well, thanks, Brian. We appreciate all your expertise. You've been absolutely invaluable at this. And then there's also a sheet that we're sending out that has other tips on it. That's kind of that you handed off to us. So they'll be getting that posted in Trello.
And the slides as well.
And the slides as well. So you can come back and you can look at everything that Brian was talking about, and have the chance to.
One or two of the students could Google and find some great tips on cover letters, and then send it to you, and you can send that out to everybody.
Hey, there you go.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Crowdsourcing.
Okay.
Thank you, Brian.
Well, you're getting lots of thank yous, Brian. Thanks so much. And again, we'll be talking soon.
Yep. Good night,
All right.
everybody. Thanks.
Good night.
Good night. Thank you. Well, all right. That was another amazing session, and so many good tips. I think it's important for all of us to know too that, I mean, our resumes are constantly evolving and growing. Like you said, Sherry, like I just worked on mine, so
Well, and even just keeping a calendar or something, even virtual. I had to go back today and do a self-evaluation for my job, and going back through the year in terms of looking at all of the different things that I've done and places I've been and people I've talked to. Boy, I look back and said, wow, I was busy. I was productive last year. You are easily able to forget those things. You should have a resume that you can go back, that's online, that you can update if you went to a conference, if you gave a paper, if you gave a poster, if you volunteered at something. You should go and have a place that you can put it in, dates, those kinds of things, because you will forget, and there will be important things that you're going to wish you'd had, and you're going to have to spend hours tracking them down or forgetting about it. And that's that. You've got to be organized in that respect to capture the things that are going to be important. And just going forward into your professional careers, all those things are additive, and you need to have some way to be able to have that out. Even as you write proposals, you're going to need the one-pager CV, or, if it's a scholarly thing or work experience, and having something that you can condense into one page that's going to be relevant for the reviewers. And having been a proposal reviewer, I always look back at the resumes to see what the team has in terms of expertise or things that will be additive towards the success of that particular proposal. So these kinds of habits are really good things to get into in the professional world early on, to where you already have those good habits already ingrained, and you're going to be able to take them forward.
And Jorge and Riley, just so you know, having an updated resume, that's a part of adulting. So yes, even adults have resumes.
Oh yeah.
And that I love the idea of showing your resume to your peers or to your mentor, somebody that really knows you and knows everything that you've done, that can help you out. When I first shared my resume with Sherry, moving here or taking this job, she said, well, I know you've done this and this and this, and those are things that I hadn't really thought about listing on my resume. And so I beefed it up. I'm one of those like very confident about my resume right now after we fine-tuned it. So but again,
but you're not looking for another job, Dan.
No, I'm not. Garrett, if you're listening, I'm not pulling a Garrett.
Don't get me worried about that.
I'm not pulling a Garrett and leaving.
Yeah, Garrett went off to Boeing. So
yeah, he's not watching. I'm kidding. But ouch, Garrett. We miss Garrett too.
Yeah,
I'll
we
let him
do.
know that we talked about him tonight.
Yeah,
but,
tell him we were thinking all good thoughts about his new job.
Yeah,
What?
no, I'm just
Garrett
kidding.
is awesome.
I'm not going anywhere, and I don't blame Garrett for going either. It's
Yeah,
a
I've got Dan's family moving here, so I
Yeah.
mean, I'm looking good in terms of longevity. But thinking of longevity in your lifetime, again, it's not the 40-year job that you have at one place. You want to be thinking about acquiring skills, thinking about how you can be more flexible in terms of things that are emerging, and all the capabilities, leadership, all the kinds of things, the writing and the speaking and all those things will give you more opportunity to have a really great choice in terms of either if you want to change jobs or if something gets truncated and you need to go find something new. I did a job search a couple of years ago thinking I might just, I've been doing this for a long time, might want to do something different. And I was amazed in terms of looking at the things. I could be CEO of Big Brothers Big Sisters. I have these kinds of skills, things that are totally outside the box. Of course, I ended up back in the space business because this is where things for me really center. But there are things that you can do that give you a wider berth and more versatility in terms of being able to make changes that you choose, or having a lot of choices in terms of when you're doing a job search. So just keep that in mind. Flexibility, versatility, those kinds of things are always a good thing. So, and apply to a lot of different kinds of jobs.
Yeah. I just sent Garrett a snap letting him know that you guys miss him. So
let us know if he comes back. All right. So yes, Mario, has there been a development on the proposition of being a mentor for other LaSpacers? We are looking into that for Next Academy, Next Level 1. Catherine, if Catherine is still
she
on.
had to step out already.
Okay.
Yeah.
We were talking about it being a Titan themed LaSpace in terms of their destination. So
The new
Titan
level
mission.
1, yeah.
So we will keep you posted on that, and we will be recruiting, and we will be, I think Catherine's planning on after this academy, starting to put the announcement out and for applications for Lucy ambassadors.
Yeah.
So we will, lots of good things. And you all are family now. You are alumni, which means you're going to be staying up on the announcements and all kinds of things. So we want to make sure that, this isn't just goodbye. We want to keep in touch. We want to hear about your future successes. We want your questions. You still have access to all of us. And we want to know what your next journeys are. This is something that's really important to us. So please know that this is an invite to stay active with us and to look for future things. It's 3 certificates. Yes, Kristen, you get 3 certificates. If you get 3 academies, yes, you will.
Or
we
one
will make
super
sure that.
certificate.
That's right.
Alyssa
right.
has a question in the chat. Sorry, I know everybody's
Okay,
ready
go ahead.
to go. My advisor at school has no experience with planetary geology as a major. Where should I look for information about what schools looking at transfers?
There's a lot of really good mainline universities. I can think of like 5 that would be my top 5 pick for planetary geology. And a lot of those have associations with missions already. So if you're going to pick something, go someplace where you could actually be associated with the current stuff going on. So, we've had undergrads here that have gone on to work in mission ops during some of our missions when we have instruments flying. I mean, I spent 4 months, not as an undergrad, but 4 months at JPL during the twin rovers, the Mars exploration rovers, working on Mars time and mission ops. So these are the kinds of things that you want to go someplace, if you can, that actually has opportunities that because they're active in the field. No matter what the field is, look for places that have activity that will give you insertion into possibly great opportunities. Okay. What else?
Catherine is working on a patch. I don't know about pins,
that's
but
right.
A patch eventually that we can get to you all. So we'll be working on that.
La Patch, yes.
Le Patch, yeah. Alyssa wants to know which schools. Alyssa, maybe send us an email offline. And we
Yeah,
can
I don't
kind of
want to.
talk
I don't
about
want to be
those.
distinguishing about one school or another. But there's a lot of them that you could easily find too. Or send me some of the ones you're thinking of that are candidates for you, and I can give you just some possible advisors or things that are in those schools, or the area of expertise within planetary that you're looking, because planetary is wide ranging, and lots of different kinds of experiences. So that would be great. All right, good.
Well, we
Got
thank the 27 of you that are still on here.
the
So
hardy souls.
this has been our longest longest session ever. So thank
Yeah.
you guys so much. We
Well, hopefully
appreciate it.
this was useful. Brian is one of the best I know in terms of just being grounded. He's hired a lot of people. He's done the internships. He's done the co-ops. We ran the program together, and I really respect his expertise. So we're glad that we could have him. And he's got a lot of assets to hand off to you too, in terms of some of the just do's and don'ts sheets. I think he covered everything really well. So hopefully, again, we are going to be hearing about your success stories in terms of jobs, internships, RUs, anything that you've got going on. We want to highlight you. So send us a headshot or send us a shot and a write-up of what you're doing. That would be fantastic. Okay. All right. I think that's probably, like Helen says, have a good night.
Have a good night.
So.
Like above it, I know above it.
All right, you're all unmuted,
and
so
now
we
we
can
have
say
a-
good night.
Yes, and go to the LSpace Instagram. It's L_Space Academy.
Yeah, go to the LSpace Instagram, please.
Thank you, Jessica. Thank you,
And tell all your
Mario.
friends to
Yeah.
follow it.
We
I'll
don't just
try
want
it.
you to
Yeah.
follow. We want you to tell everybody to follow. Mario, you too. We have that's a goal for you, is to tell all your followers, hey, I'm doing this live takeover. So thank you. And some of you are
I've
next.
actually been going around the university and the campus being like, hey, join. Follow.
That's good.
Thank you guys for the opportunity, to be honest. It's been great. Good night.
No, thanks for volunteering. Good night.
All right. Night, everyone.
Good night.
All right.
Good night.
Aloha. Buenas noches.
Noche.
Good night.
Bye.
Right.